My name's Chloe, and I've got a story to tell you. It all started back in college. I was just another face in the crowd, trying to figure out my place in the world. That's when I first laid eyes on him. Let's call him Jack. God, he was something else. Tall, dark hair, eyes that could melt your heart. But Jack was dating this girl, Sarah. She was everything I wasn't: confident, outgoing, drop-dead gorgeous. I watched from the sidelines as they walked hand in hand across campus, feeling like my heart was being squeezed in a vice. But what could I do? I was just Chloe, the quiet girl who sat in the back of the class. College flew by in a blur of lectures, late-night study sessions, and silent pining. Before I knew it, we were throwing our caps in the air, ready to face the real world. That's when I heard the news: Sarah had left Jack high and dry, jetting off to Japan without so much as a backward glance. My heart skipped a beat. This was my chance. I knew it was wrong to be happy about someone else's misfortune, but I couldn't help the flutter of hope in my chest. I found Jack sitting alone on a bench outside the library, looking like his world had ended. I took a deep breath and approached him. We started talking, and he admitted he doesn't want any relationship anytime soon. It was painful, but I was glad that we had already become friends. As graduation approached, reality set in. We needed jobs. I sent out resumes like they were going out of style, applying to every company that would take a second look at a fresh-faced college grad. Then, out of the blue, I got a call. A big company wanted to interview me. I was over the moon. I put on my best suit and walked into that interview like I owned the place. I got the job. It wasn't until my first day that I realized the twist of fate that had just played out. There, hanging on the wall of the office, was a photo of the company executives. And right in the center, looking important and intimidating, was a face I recognized: Sarah's father. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, I found out Jack had landed a job at the same company. Different department, sure, but still, talk about a small world. I threw myself into work, determined to prove my worth. Late nights, early mornings, I lived and breathed that job. And you know what? It paid off. I started climbing that corporate ladder faster than I ever thought possible. Weekends became our thing, Jack and me. We'd grab coffee, catch a movie, or just walk around the city, talking about everything and nothing. I felt myself falling for him all over again, but this time it was different. This time, he was seeing me, really seeing me. One night, after a couple of beers at our favorite bar, Jack turned to me, his eyes serious. "Chloe," he said, his voice low. "I think I'm falling for you. These past couple of years, getting to know you. I've never felt like this about anyone, not even Sarah." And just like that, we were together. It felt like a dream, going to work together, stealing kisses in the elevator when no one was looking, planning our weekends around each other. For 2 years, life was perfect. Then came the proposal. It was nothing fancy, just us, a bottle of wine, and the stars above us in the park. But when Jack got down on one knee, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. The wedding planning was a whirlwind. I was so caught up in the excitement that I barely noticed the first red flag: my future mother-in-law's comments about traditional family values. "You know, dear," she said one day over tea, her voice syrupy sweet, but her eyes hard. "A woman's place is in the home, taking care of her children. That's what makes a family strong." I laughed it off, thinking she was joking. "Well, I love my job. I'm sure we'll find a balance." Her smile tightened. "Of course, dear. I'm sure you will." The wedding day came and went in a blur of white lace and champagne toasts. I was Mrs. Jack Thompson now, and I thought my happily ever after was just beginning. For a while, it was good. Great, even. We were the power couple at work, supporting each other, pushing each other to be better. At home, we were just us, laughing, loving, building our life together. But as the months ticked by, I started to notice the pressure. It started small, comments from Jack's parents about how the house seemed empty without the pitter-patter of little feet. Then came the not-so-subtle hints about my biological clock ticking. After a year of marriage with no baby on the way, things really started to heat up. Jack's mother cornered me one day after Sunday dinner. "Chloe, dear," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Have you seen a doctor? It's not normal to take this long, you know." I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. "We're not actively trying yet," I lied, hoping she'd drop it. She patted my hand condescendingly. "Of course, dear. But maybe you should get checked out, just in case." I wanted to scream, to tell her to mind her own business. But instead, I just nodded and excused myself to the bathroom, where I could breathe and collect myself. That night, I brought it up with Jack. "Your mom thinks I should see a doctor," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. Jack looked up from his phone, his brow furrowed. "Maybe that's not a bad idea," he said slowly. "I mean, we haven't been using protection for a while now. It wouldn't hurt to check." So I went. I sat through uncomfortable tests and invasive questions, all the while feeling like I was being judged for not fulfilling my womanly duties. When the results came back, everything was normal. I should have felt relieved, but instead, I felt even more pressure. "Well, if there's nothing wrong, then why aren't you pregnant yet?" Jack asked when I told him the results. I suggested he get tested too, but he brushed it off. "It's not me," he said firmly. "It's always the woman. That's just biology." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the man I married. Where was the supportive partner who had cheered me on in my career? Now he was parroting his mother's outdated views, making me feel like a failure for not producing a baby on demand. I felt like I was drowning. At home, every interaction with Jack felt tense. He'd criticize everything I did, how I cooked, how I cleaned, even how I breathed. Nothing was ever good enough. "Can't you do anything right?" he'd snap when I burned dinner after a long day at work. "I'm trying my best," I'd say, fighting back tears. He'd scoff. "Your best isn't good enough. A real woman would be able to handle this." Each comment chipped away at my self-esteem. I started to believe I was worthless, that I couldn't do anything right. The confident, ambitious Chloe who had worked her way up the corporate ladder seemed like a distant memory. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, life decided to prove me wrong. It was a Tuesday morning when I first saw her, Sarah, Jack's ex-girlfriend, the one who'd left him for Japan. She waltzed into the office like she owned the place, all confident smiles and designer clothes. My stomach dropped. What was she doing here? Then I remembered, her father was the company president. Of course she'd come back to work for Daddy Dearest. I tried to keep my head down, to focus on my work, but it was impossible to ignore her presence. Especially when she made it her mission to make my life hell. It started with little things, a snide comment here, a condescending look there. Then one day, she cornered me in the break room. Well, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "If it isn't little Chloe, don't get too comfortable. I'm back now, and I always get what I want." From that day on, work became a battlefield. Sarah seemed to be everywhere, always ready with a cutting remark or a pitying look. And worst of all, I started noticing how often she and Jack were together. The rumors started flying. I'd catch snippets of conversations that would stop abruptly when I walked by. People looked at me with a mixture of pity and schadenfreude. One day, my colleague Lisa pulled me aside. "Chloe," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I don't know if you've heard, but people are saying Jack and Sarah are having an affair. I hope it's not true, but you might want to keep an eye out." I didn't want to believe it. I told myself it was just office gossip, that Jack would never do that to me. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew with every late night at the office, every secretive phone call, every time I caught Sarah smirking at me across the room. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I hired a private detective. It felt dirty, like I was betraying Jack's trust. But I had to know the truth. A week later, the detective handed me a manila envelope. I'm sorry, he said, his eyes full of pity. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were photos, Jack and Sarah together, holding hands, kissing. And the final blow, a copy of a sonogram. Sarah was pregnant. That night, when Jack came home, I was waiting for him. The photos were spread out on the kitchen table. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Instead, he laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that made my blood run cold. Well, what did you expect? He sneered. Sarah's a real woman. She can give me what you can't. And what's that? I asked, fighting back tears. A child, he spat. Something you've failed to do. Face it, Chloe, you're not even half the woman Sarah is. In that moment, something inside me snapped. All the pain, all the self-doubt, all the anger I'd been holding back, came rushing to the surface. I threw the divorce papers at him, papers I'd had drawn up the moment I saw those photos. Sign these and get out of my life. After that explosive confrontation with Jack, I couldn't bear to stay in our house anymore. So, I packed a bag and moved into a small rented apartment across town. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a space where I could lick my wounds and figure out my next move. 2 weeks later, I was heading to a meeting when I literally ran into them in the hallway. Jack and Sarah, standing there like they owned the place, her hand resting possessively on her slightly swollen belly. The smirk on Sarah's face made my blood boil. Well, Sarah drawled, her voice dripping with false sympathy. If it isn't the soon-to-be ex-Mrs. Thompson. How are you holding up, sweetie? I could feel the anger rising in me, threatening to spill over. Actually, I'm doing great, I said, my voice steady. In fact, I was just about to let you know that I'll be suing both of you for adultery. I have all the evidence I need, including proof of the emotional distress you've caused me. Hope you're ready for a legal battle. The smug looks on their faces faltered for a moment. Jack's eyes widened in panic, but Sarah quickly recovered, her face twisting into a sneer. You, she scoffed. Sue us? Don't make me laugh, you penniless upstart. I'll tell Daddy about this, and he'll have you out on the street before you can blink. You'll never work in this town again. I felt a flicker of fear at her threat, but I refused to let it show. We'll see about that, I said, pushing past them and continuing on my way. But Sarah's words haunted me for the rest of the day. Could her father really destroy my career like that? I tossed and turned all night, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. The next morning, my fears seemed to be coming true when I received a summons to the president's office. This was it, I thought. I'm about to be fired and blacklisted. With my heart pounding, I stepped inside on Mr. Johnson's door, bracing myself for the worst. But what happened next caught me completely off guard. Mr. Johnson stood up from behind his desk, his face etched with, "Was that guilt?" "Chloe," he began, his voice heavy. "I owe you an apology. What my daughter and your husband have done to you is inexcusable. I'm deeply ashamed of Sarah's behavior." I stood there, stunned into silence. This was the last thing I had expected. He continued, "However, I think we both know that it would be difficult for you to continue working here under these circumstances. That's why I have a proposition for you. If you're willing to resign quietly, without pursuing any legal action, I'm prepared to offer you a severance package." He slid a check across the desk. My eyes widened as I saw the figure. It was far more than I would have asked for in any lawsuit. In addition, Mr. Johnson added, "I'll provide you with glowing recommendations for any future employment. You're a talented woman, Chloe. You deserve better than this mess." I stared at the check, my mind racing. This was more than just a way out, it was a chance at a fresh start, free from all the drama and pain of the past few months. "I accept," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. And just like that, it was done. I walked out of that office with a weight lifted off my shoulders. The divorce was finalized quickly and quietly. I didn't look back. With Mr. Johnson's recommendations, I landed a fantastic new job within weeks. The severance package? Well, that became the down payment on a cozy little apartment of my own. My new job felt like a breath of fresh air. For the first time in years, I could focus on my work without the constant weight of expectations and criticism. As the weeks turned into months, I felt myself coming back to life. The confident, ambitious woman I used to be started to resurface. I threw myself into projects, shared ideas in meetings without second-guessing myself, and even started mentoring some of the younger employees. That's when I noticed him, David, the owner of the company. At first, I thought I was imagining things. The lingering glances, the way he'd find excuses to stop by my desk, how he always seemed to grab coffee at the same time I did. One day, after a particularly successful presentation, David asked me out for a celebratory dinner. That dinner turned into another, and another. Before I knew it, we were dating. It was different from anything I'd experienced before. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen and appreciated. Our relationship progressed quickly, but it felt right. When David proposed 6 months later, I didn't hesitate to say yes. But before we got married, I knew I had to be honest with him. "David," I said one night, my heart pounding. "There's something you should know. In my previous marriage, we tried to have children, but it never happened. I might not be able to have kids." I held my breath, waiting for his reaction. But David just smiled and took my hand. "Chloe," he said softly, "I love you for who you are, not for your ability to bear children. If we have kids, great. If we don't, that's fine too. What matters is that we're together." We got married in a small, intimate ceremony. And just like that, I was Mrs. Chloe Anderson. About a year after our wedding, I started feeling nauseous in the mornings. At first, I brushed it off as a stomach bug. But when it persisted, I decided to see a doctor. I'll never forget the shock I felt when the doctor smiled and said, "Congratulations, Mrs. Anderson, you're pregnant." Pregnant. The word I'd longed to hear for so long in my previous marriage. And now, when I wasn't even trying, here it was. 9 months later, our son Michael was born. As I held him in my arms, David by my side, I felt a sense of completion I'd never known before. This was my family, a loving husband who supported me, a beautiful child, and a fulfilling career. I had it all, and I'd never been happier. The years flew by. Michael grew into a smart, curious boy. David and I continued to thrive in our careers and our relationship. Life was good. Then came that day, 11 years later. I was cleaning out my email, archiving old messages and documents, when I stumbled across an email I'd never seen before. It was from the fertility clinic I'd visited during my first marriage. With trembling hands, I opened it. It was Jack's fertility test results that showed he was the one who couldn't have children. All those years of blame, of making me feel worthless, and it had been him all along. For a moment, I was tempted to forward the email to Jack, to finally prove that I wasn't the failure he'd made me out to be. But as I sat there, my finger hovering over the send button, I realized something. It didn't matter anymore. It was a crisp autumn evening when David came home with an invitation to a charity dinner. The Foundation for Helping Children with Cancer was hosting the event, and as the CEO of his company, David's presence was expected. The ballroom was a sea of elegant gowns and tailored suits. Michael, now 12, looked adorably uncomfortable in his little tuxedo. As we made our way through the crowd, I couldn't help but feel proud of my family. "I'm going to grab us some drinks," David said, giving my hand a squeeze. "Why don't you show Michael around?" I nodded, watching as they disappeared into the crowd. That's when I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. Well, if it isn't Chloe." I turned slowly, coming face to face with Jack, my ex-husband. He looked older, his hair graying at the temples, but that cruel smirk was exactly as I remembered it. "Jack," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I didn't expect to see you here." He looked me up and down, his lip curling. "I can see why. Looks like you've been comfort eating." Stress of loneliness and infertility finally catching up with you, huh? I felt my cheeks burn with anger and embarrassment. Before I could respond, he barreled on. You know, my son is a certified genius. Takes after his mother, of course. Sarah's been an excellent wife and mother. Everything you couldn't be. As if summoned by her name, Sarah appeared at Jack's side. Her eyes widened in mock surprise. Chloe, what are you doing here? She asked, her voice carrying across the room. You must feel so out of place. After all, how could you possibly understand about helping children when you don't have any of your own? I felt like I was back in my old life, small and insignificant under their cruel words. But before I could gather my thoughts, I heard a young voice pipe up. Mom, who are these people? Why are they yelling at you? Michael had appeared at my side, his young face twisted with concern. I saw Jack's eyes widen in shock, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You have a son, he stuttered, all his earlier bravado evaporating. She sure does, came a deep voice from behind me. I felt David's strong hand on my shoulder as he stepped up beside me. Hello, I don't believe we've met. I'm David Anderson, Chloe's husband. The color drained from Jack's face as recognition dawned. Mr. Anderson? The CEO of Anderson Corp? David nodded, his smile never wavering. That's right. And you are? Jack seemed to shrink under David's gaze. Jack Thompson, sir. My father-in-law's company does business with yours. The tension in the air was palpable as Jack stammered, trying to recover his composure. Mr. Anderson, I had no idea. Please accept my apologies for my behavior. I didn't mean to cause any disturbance at your event. David's expression remained impassive, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Before he could respond, Sarah, apparently unable to let go of her bitterness, decided to twist the knife one last time. She pointed at Michael, her voice shrill with accusation. But how is this possible? Where did this boy come from? Everyone knows you're infertile, Chloe. You couldn't give Jack children, remember? Something inside me snapped. Actually, Sarah, I said, my voice steady and clear, I think it's time for some truth to come out. I turned to Jack, whose face had gone pale. I found a letter from the fertility clinic, Jack. Turns out, you're the one who can't have children. Jack's jaw dropped, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. I couldn't help but add, with a smile that was perhaps a touch too sweet. So, in fact, you're not the father of Sarah's son either. The words hung in the air for a moment before chaos erupted. Sarah's face contorted with panic, and she grabbed Jack's arm. We need to leave, now. But Jack wasn't having it. He grabbed her wrist, his face red with fury. What is she talking about, Sarah? What have you done? Sarah's composure crumbled entirely. It was in Japan, she wailed, tears streaming down her face. I met a friend of my father's. It was just one night, but then I found out I was pregnant. I was scared, Jack. I knew Daddy would be furious. So when you came back into my life, I thought I could make it work. What happened next was like a scene from a bad movie. Jack and Sarah began screaming at each other, oblivious to the crowd gathering around them. In their fury, they knocked over a table, sending glasses crashing to the floor. Wine splashed across Sarah's designer dress and Jack's expensive suit. Security guards appeared, firmly escorting the still arguing couple out of the ballroom. As the doors closed behind them, cutting off the sound of their shouts, an awkward silence fell over the remaining guests. David cleared his throat, addressing the stunned onlookers. Well, folks, I think we've had enough excitement for one evening. Why don't we get back to the real reason we're here, helping children in need? His words broke the tension, and gradually, the party resumed its normal flow. David turned to me, concern etched on his face. Are you okay, love? I took a deep breath, surprised to find that I actually was. You know what? I really am. It's like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying has finally been lifted. Apparently, word traveled fast in these circles. Within days, I learned that Jack had filed for divorce, demanding compensation from Sarah for her deception. Sarah's father, furious at the public scandal, had fired Jack from the company and blacklisted him in the industry. But you know what? None of that mattered to me anymore. As I watched David patiently explaining the concept of adult problems to Michael over a slice of chocolate cake, I realized that I had everything I ever wanted right here. The past was finally where it belonged, in the past. I had a husband who loved and respected me, a son who brought joy to every day, and a career that fulfilled me. I was Chloe Anderson, and my life was pretty damn perfect.